Let's walk through participation activity 3. We're going to create a tip calculator, again using Android Studio. Idea is that maybe you're out at a restaurant with two friends, so there's three of you. You have a bill and you want to just each leave some of the tip. How much should each of you leave? So we'll create something like this to start with. So let's run Android Studio. And then again, we'll just start with a new project. Now, if we've saved this project on version control and you want to open it up here, you can go here and go grab this from GitHub. And we'll be saving this from GitHub. So it's possible that you might want to grab this back from GitHub if you're on a different computer. But to start with, we'll just start with a new project. Somewhere you've got to start with a new project. Give it some name, tip calculator. I'm going to add record because I'm recording this session. Again, you can watch where it's being recorded by default. It might be just in your user directory. And I like to switch this to documents because that's easier for me to get to. So I'm saving it there. The minimum SDK, again, depending on what phones you're working with, my two run 5, so I'm going to switch this to version 5. But again, if you have older phones, you might have to switch this to an earlier version of Android. It doesn't impact things too much. And we're going to start with an empty activity rather than a basic activity. There'll be less code involved, and we're just going to leave it called main and let it start up. Now, we're going to go into the XML layout and lay out this sort of layout. We're going to start with a text view here and an edit text field here where they can enter the bill. Number of people, that'll be a text view, a label. And then rather than doing radio buttons to start, we're going to just do another edit text field here where you can enter the number of people. There's another checkbox here for if you had good service. That'll change the tip amount button for calculating it, and 2 text views down here for displaying the total tip and the tip per person. In green here, I've put on what I'm probably going to name these. Some of these are going to need IDs so I can access them with code. Now some of these text views up here are just labels and I don't need to access them in code, but some of the text views I'll be actually changing their text. So I will have to access them in code. So this is kind of the naming conventions I'm going to start. So with Android Studio started up, inside the apps folder, we have the Java folder, and inside our namespace, we have our main activity. And also inside resource layout, we have the activity main. Those should still both be open by default here. With this simple activity that we created, there's no view activity. There's just one layout, and everything's in there. So that simplifies what we need to do. So now we're going to go into this layout and create this sort of stuff. A couple of view texts, edit texts as we go. So let's start there. So I've got an edit text here, a text view here. I'm going to drop a edit text now. Under edit texts, there are numbers and number decimals. This we want a decimal number. So I'm going to drag that in here, position it like that. Grab another edit text view so I can ask the number of people in the party, and then that'll just be a number. Now with these edit text fields, we're specifying number or whatever. You can actually change that later on if you get the wrong type. You click on it in its properties and you can select a bunch of different values here for it. So this just builds those naturally. Okay, now I'm going to want a checkbox here, and then a button. And finally, 2 final text views down at the bottom. And then I want to go through and name these or ID these. So like I say, this first one, I just want it to say bill amount, and I don't need to worry about the ID here. I can change that. Now, I found with Android Studio, the first time you try to change a property, it delays for a while. There's a little wait while it does some, I don't know what it does, but there's this pause here, and then it'll put your cursor, and then it's only the first time you get into editing the text this way. So now I can just change this to bill amount. And again, I don't care about the ID for that, but like this text field, I want to have that called edit text bill. It's already called edit text. I'm just going to add the bill onto it. Same with this edit text field. I want that to be changed. Now, it'll ask if you want to update the R field. You always want to update the R field. That's your interface with the Java. And so I usually click this so that it won't ask it again and then say yes. So this second edit text is the number of people. Our checkbox here, we'll change that to checkbox service, and also change the check on it. Our button will be button calculate. I often leave the name of the type of object as part of the ID, just to have it in mind. Different places do different things. So and then our final two text views here. Again, that one will be the total tip. And the other one will be for the tip per person. So I got my basic layout done here with these text fields. Now I can go into my code, my main activity, and I want to set up variables for these things. I'm going to expand this import so we can see some of the import stuff. So there's three things we need to do here. Similar to what we looked at in the here. When we did our exercise earlier, we position the widgets, we want to declare the variables in the main activity class, initialize the variables in onCreate, and we can use those other places like in our button click. So this is what we'll do here. So again, in our main activity here, we'll initialize our variables. So we'll have a bunch, we'll have two edit text fields, give them each name. Now, it says hit Alt Enter to do an import. So I'll hit Alt Enter and it'll import the right widget up here. Now you might want to set it up so that it automatically does that import here. Now I'm going to edit text. I'm going to give it some name. So this is going to be my bill. I'm just going to call it ET bill. And I'll need another edit text for the number of people. I'll need a couple text views. One will be the total tip, and one will be the tip per person. So again, I'm associating each one of these variables. These are in blue. I've put the names of the Java variables I'm using, and I'm just using this. I'm just shortening it to ET for edit text, and in bill, ET edit text number of people, and TV for text view here. So I want to tie those. I've declared them up here. Now inside my onCreate, I'm going to tie those in. So right now there's not much in onCreate because I did an empty activity. There's no menu set up or anything like that. I just call the parents on crate, the super on crate, and then I set the context view to activity main, this view here. And again, this is all done for me. But now I'm going to initialize my variables. So I'm going to start with my edit text bill and set that equal to, now we're going to use this find view by ID. If you just type in find, it'll pop up there, and that'll look up in your layout the ID, and we always do r.id dot, and you can look through this. This is the edit text bill. I'm just going to grab that one and hit semicolon. Now this returns a generic type, and we need it as an edit text type, so I've got to cast this to an edit text here. And I'm going to do this for all 4 variables. Okay, so I've entered all these things in here. So each of my variables up here I tie to a control in my view with this find view ID and casting it to the right type, either an edit text or a text view, and mapping it in. So that creates this map. This is the object, this is what its ID in the view, and this bill, ET bill is an ET. These are the variables in Java that I'll be using. So this is kind of my layout here. Next thing we want to do is create my button and do a method here. Now I could just type in the method here. If I typed in the method of the right format, I can just go on my button here, and under on click I can select that. Another way to doing it is I could type in a name here, and this is what I'm going to do since we're just learning how to do it. I'm going to call this on click button calculate. Now I'm going to switch to the text view here instead of design view. Find my button, and I can use that. Go down to my button here, click here, and it should pop up this little message. Now for some reason I often have to click on it twice, but at some point maybe I have to click on here. It should pop up a create on click event handler. Maybe it just has to compile for a second. So create on click event handler, do that, hit OK. And that's created this on-click event handler here for us to do. Now later on we'll learn that these on-click event handlers, we'll do these quite a bit, and we'll just type these in. It's always public void, the name of the event handler, and then view is the type. And once you type that in, we'd be able to just go over here and quickly click on our button and select that from the list. Okay, but now now these are tied together, and we want to do some stuff. So we want to start with, I'm just going to see if I can change the total tip and display the total bill there. So I'm going to say TV total tip, and we'll be using these 2 methods, set text and get text, to set and get the text. So I'm going to set the text to total, I'm just going to say bill first, and then I'm going to add in, I'm going to get the text, edit text control from up here, and now I'm going to get its text, get text, and set that up. So it should be getting this text and setting this text. So I'm just saying grab the text, whatever number was entered in this edit text field, and concatenate that to the words total bill and put that, set the text of this up. Now I can run this, and it initializes my device controls, and now I can either plug in a phone or select one of these controls. So on my recording computer right now, I don't have, my devices would show up here or my emulators, and I don't have this working, so I'm not going to run this emulator right here. But I could show you how this is working, or you can run this on the device. If you plug in your phone, it should show up here, or if you set up an emulator, it should show up here. Okay, so this will do our basic layout for us, but we really want to display a tip, not this total tip. So we're going to want to take do some calculations here. So let's just say your bill is $100, and for normal service we're going to tip 10%. So your total tip should be 10% times the bill amount. So we're going to want to do that. So in our calculations, we're going to set up some variables. We're going to use doubles. I suggest you use doubles with a capital D because they have a little additional methods attached to them. So we'll have one for the bill. And now we're going to get that from the edit text field for the bill. Calling get text now, but this is going to return to us a string, and so we want to convert that into a double. So we can say double dot parse double. So this double dot parse double lets us convert a string into a double. Now this is complaining a little bit because edit text dot get text is actually like an editable string type. It's not a standard string, so I can hit dot and do toString to get it toString. So this will convert whatever is in the text box to a string here, and then double dot parse double will convert that into a double. I'm going to do that for a couple other variables. Okay, so I also have to grab the number of people here, set that up. So again, I'm going to grab my edit text field, get the text from it, convert it to a string, take that whole thing and put it inside a call to double dot parse double, and that'll convert it to a double. And I'm going to share that, store that in a variable called num people. One of the reasons I like here with the edit text fields, I put the ET on to mark this as a text field, and then I use the, so if I don't have anything in there, it's just a number or a variable I can work with. Now I'm going to calculate the tip, so I'm going to declare another variable, total tip, and that's just going to be the bill times 10% or 0.1. Right now I'm just going to always use 10% at first to get it to work. And then again, tip per person is the total tip divided by the number of people. And I'm going to set my outputs here to output both the total tip and the tip per person. So I'm setting what I'm printing out to these text views. And again, remember those are my variables tied to my controls, TV, total tip dot, and I'm using set text rather than get text to set the text. Putting in some text, and then I'm going to use my variable I have from up here and just converting it to a string and concatenating that, and same with tips per person, printing that out. So this will print out this information to that. So that sets up this basic format for us to use. So we've got our bill amount and our text view. One thing we don't have is we're not using this outstanding service. So what we want to do is if they, let's go back here, tip 10% normally, and if they choose outstanding service, switch it to 20%. So we want to work on that. So let's go into our code a little bit. And so here where we calculate the total tip, we want to put this in an if-then statement. I want to say if, and then something, and then we're going to use this. Otherwise, we're going to calculate the tip slightly different. So one time we're going to use 10%, another time we're going to use 20% for us. Now, and so now we just have to check if the checkbox is checked. So we've got to look at our checkbox here and look at the ID. It's called checkbox service. So I have to remember that ID, and now I have to set that up here to work. And to set up here. So I'm going to declare a variable for that checkbox, and it's going to call it CB service. And again, in my onCreate method, I'm going to set that up. I'm going to set CB service equal to, and I have to cast it to a checkbox. And then I have to do my find by ID and do r.id dot, and then I'm going to do my checkbox service here, and then do my semicolon. So this will link up this variable to my checkbox in my layout, and now I can just use that variable if CB service dot. Now there's a number of options here. You might want to look at, is enabled, is focused, is selected, but the one we want to look at for this is actually is checked. That's the correct one. So if it's checked, then we want to set the bill, and actually I'm going to reverse this. If it's checked, I want to set the, then it is outstanding, otherwise it's not. So I'm going to set this up. Now, I notice I get an error here, total tip is here. I'm going to watch where I declare my variables. I can't declare a variable inside an if-then. So I've got to set it up so I declare total tip up here and then just use it inside my if-thens here. Okay, so I declare it up here and use it inside my if-thens because I need to use it outside my if statements down here. So we've got that set up. So now this should work with this total tip. Now I'm going to show you how to push this out to GitHub, and then if you want, we'll also look at adding radio boxes. But first, let's do this to GitHub. So you need a GitHub account for that. You can register for a special developers pack here if you're with a student ID, which gives you some good things, or you can just use a normal free GitHub account. So with GitHub, you should be able to go out here. If I'm logged in, and I should see my repositories here that are here, and so that's what we're going to look at and push a repository out here. So we're going to look at, if we have a project, we're going to add that project to GitHub. So we're going to start tracking changes with Git and push it out there. So under our version control system, we're going to look at import into version control and share a project on GitHub. So again, here in our project, we're just going to say version control, import into version control, and share project on GitHub. So make sure you don't go to this checkout, go to import into version control. This will set it up so it's going to track all the changes to your projects. Give it some name here, maybe some description, recorded version. And we're going to share this. This is all the files that it's going to update out there. That's fine. Usually they'll just say OK here. And then you should see it telling you that it's pushing it out to GitHub down here. And you can wait for it. It should take just a minute to update itself. Okay, add me if I wanted to add this. Yes, you can just say OK if for any files it wants to add. And now it should be set. Now if we go back to GitHub, and I refresh this page, here's my tip calculator recorded version that's available here, and here's all my code. If I go into app, in the app folder, inside source, not the test, inside main, here I should be able to look at main activity, and here's all my code. I can see that all there. I can also look at my layout will be in resources layout, so all that code will be there. So then you know that, and then you can take this URL that's up here, actually the one that we started with, this URL that you have, and this will be the URL you can submit as a project, because I can then go in and view your code. And I can actually download your project and open it up in Android Studio also. Okay, so let's say you've got that set up, but let's say we make some more changes to version control. What would we do there? So let's just say we added some comments in here, something like that for now. This is a comment, and maybe up here we're going to say declare needed variables for widgets. Okay, so I've made some changes to here, and now we're going to do here So now we're going to push updates to GitHub. We're going to go to commit changes and push those changes up to GitHub. So again, I've made my changes here. I'm going to go into version control and say commit changes. And I have to give it some short description. This is telling me what files have been changed. I'm going to give it some just a short message. Added some comments and commit. It might have you give you some warnings. Just ignore the warnings and say commit. That's okay. There's always a couple warnings with these programs. So make sure don't hit review, hit commit. And so now the file should be committed. Those changes have been saved. Now if I look up in GitHub, those changes won't be there yet. If I go into my app, source, main, tip calculator, my comments aren't here yet. It's tracking the changes, but I have to do what is called push them up to GitHub. So again, I have to go to version control. Under Git, there's a push option here, and that'll push them up. So push pushes them up to the GitHub. Pull pulls changes down from GitHub. So I'm going to do a push, and again, it shows what files have been changed, and I'm going to hit push. And it should tell you that it's pushing these changes up to GitHub. Now I should go there. If I refresh this page, it's got my comments, my changes are now in here. So you can make changes now, and like instead of saving them to the local drive like you would normally do, you can also commit and push them every once in a while up to GitHub to see that. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do is look at changing this so it uses some radio buttons. So I'm going to go back here and change this, and here where I have a text view, I'm going to change this so it has some radio buttons for us to use. So I'm going to delete that edit text. I'm going to move this up here. Oops, when some of these things sometimes will jump around a little bit, so I'm going to move these things around a little bit, and then I'm going to grab some radio buttons here and move them into place. I'm going to start with 3 radio buttons to start, and I'm going to label them here. So each one I'm going to change the text to be, the first one will be 1. And then I want to make sure I change their names. They're actually named pretty good. Radio button 2, this one is actually called radio button 2. This is called radio button 3. I'm going to actually change the first radio button, which is just ID is radio button, to radio button 1. So they all follow the same name convention here. So I'm going to leave those IDs as is. Now I'm going to go to my main activity. Now I've eliminated this edit text field. I'm going to get rid of that. And same up here, it's no longer here. I'm going to add some of these radio buttons. So I'm going to need 3 radio buttons. So I'm going to declare my 3 radio buttons here, and I'm going to set up each one to tie in with the text, the layout. So I've added, tied each radio button into its layout here. So I have all my radio buttons tied into their layouts. Now I have to go in here. Now remember, I used to set this number of people just using the text box. And then I'm going to have to change this to some sort of if-then structure. So again, I can declare the variable, and I can just say if radio button 1 dot is checked. So that means we have 1 person. Then I'm going to set number of people to 1. And I can do that for all 3 radio buttons. If 2 is checked, set number of people to 2. If 3 is checked, set number of people to 3. And I only do this 3, but you could actually easily do this with 4, as you can see. I'm going to switch this back rather than, I'm going to switch this to an integer uh, and work with integers here because this is really an integer, not a double. Okay. So now I've got the right number. Now I could be putting some else's in here, but hopefully only one radio button is checked at a time, so maybe we don't want to worry about that. Now, if you might have to watch if your radio buttons are set up here and you can click multiple ones at a time, there's a special thing if you go down after text fields to layout, nope, after layouts to containers, there's a radio button group. You can drag that on your screen and put your radio buttons in there, and that should allow for only one radio button to be clicked at a time. Okay, so now we go down here. It is complaining that number of people may not have been defined, so I'm going to define it. Since I'm going to dividing, I'm going to initialize it to 1 by default. So the default will be just one person in the party. Okay, so now we should be compiling and running everything correctly. So, and again, I want to save these changes. So again, it saves them here, but if I want to save them to the internet, to GitHub, I want to commit and then give something. So I changed to radio buttons and hit commit. And again, don't hit review, hit commit here. And then under version control, push these up to GitHub. And then I should see those, if I reload the page, I should see those changes here. Now, if you're working on multiple computers, if you have a pre-existing one, when you start a project, you can check out that project from GitHub. And if you've updated it on one computer, you may have to pull down those changes from another computer. So these are the steps for doing that. So you can watch. It's hard to merge changes, so you should be either doing changes on one computer or the other, and make sure when you're done you push and commit and push them, and when you start you pull those changes to your other computer if you're working with multiple ones. Okay, that's our participation project. Just submit the GitHub URL where I can find your project.